full quorum. Are we missing anyone? I don't believe we are.
No, you've got a full quorum.
Beautiful. All right, 6 o'clock. I'd like to call this meeting to order for the City Council meeting for the City of Montgomery. With that, let's start with the invocation. TJ Wilkerson to provide that for us this evening.
Lord, thank you. We come once again with humble hearts and bowed heads. We come thanking you for this opportunity that you've given us, Lord, to come together. We thank you for your love and your mercy. We pray, Lord, that we all weather the storm that is before us. Guide us with understanding and wisdom as we come together tonight to discuss the city and its business. Thank you for all that you've done, and thank you for your Holy Spirit. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Next up is the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God,
with liberty and justice for all.
Now the Texas flag. Honor the Texas
Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to the
one state under God, one indivisible.
All right, visitors forum. I didn't get anything prior to this meeting. So Susan or Richard, is there anything?
No, Mayor.
No, I didn't have anything on my end.
And the first item of business on your agenda is the consent agenda. Item number 1, matters related to the approval of minutes of the August 11th, 2020 regular meeting. Number 2, consideration and possible action regarding the renewal transfer application for Cedar Crest Mobile Home Park.
I just have a question regarding number 2.
Okay.
Richard, on the transfer application, the new owner is aware that, or I guess this isn't one of those things where the city has failed to realize that a transfer could happen. I'd just like to make sure that the ongoing obligations to annually recertify the conditions of the mobile home park are intact.
Yes, I just want to say this is Lily Golden. I'm the new owner. Thank you very much for looking into this for us. We do realize that we have this annual renewal process. We're excited to be a part of the City of Montgomery. And we've read through all the documents so we understand what we need to do. There's somebody in Dobbins that'll be running through the park every week. And if you have any issues, please give me a phone call. I think Richard has my phone number, and we're here and ready to fix any issues that you may find.
Okay, because I think in the past, relations have not been fabulous, and I think that they've gotten better. The last few renewals have been relatively good. I think the last one had a few issues, but the one prior was, I think, quite good, and I'd like to keep it that way. You know, the city does not have a lot of lower income housing options, but that doesn't mean that, you know, the ones that we do have should be lower quality. So I'd like to make sure that we keep the image of the city up to, or at least, you know, the quality that we've had in the last few years up to the standards that we've set.
Just in the due diligence process, we replaced 3 residences, and you know, we want to take care of our existing residences and make sure that they are able to stay there, because we certainly don't want to displace anyone, but through the natural attrition of people, we want to replace them with new units. And you know, one of our plans is, you know, we start to get some income in, is to put in new lighting, and we hope to continue to upgrade the park and have it meet the standards that you're looking for as well.
Okay, thank you for that.
Richard,
I have one quick question.
Sure.
On that, do you have to have pay for a new permit or just the transfer? Since it's a new owner, do they have to pay the
We have to pay
transfer
for
fee?
a transfer and the annual.
Right. After this transfer on an annual basis, you know, for each year going forward, they will conform to the regular annual renewal with the annual inspection that you've
Okay.
seen in the past.
Hey, Richard, I know in the past we had a problem with individual water meter accountability. So I know the city put a master water meter and I think we do a comparison of that. I thought that we put that in that contract a couple of years ago. I didn't see it in there.
There is a separate contract regarding the master meter agreement. That was one thing Ms. Golden and I discussed previous to the transfer, because that contract was not made to be transferable. And so we know we have to circle back shortly, in order to discuss a new agreement between the city with the Cedar Crest Mobile LLC. And I'm sure we'll be able to work that out in short order. I've told her that we will continue to operate from the city end as we had been for the next several months, so that we can get that contract in place without feeling like there was an immediate timeline that had to be worked out during a pandemic, before a sale. And so we're going to circle back in the next month to talk about that and be able to work that out. But that's a separate agreement from from the registration and the renewal application.
Okay.
Although in terms of leverage and getting it done and the that sort of thing, it seems that it makes sense to do it somewhat simultaneously. Does the city have enough oomph to get it done after, if we approve the transfer?
Well, there's always the annual application process that comes up.
Okay. Do you feel that that's adequate?
I do.
Okay.
Ms. Golden, do you have any other properties or mobile home parks in and around the area? Just curious of your experience.
So we're in the commercial real estate business. Our website is evergreentx.com. We own several properties under different partnerships, and then we've owned several residential units, not necessarily mobile home parks, but several apartment units.
Okay. Council, is there any other questions?
I think I'm good. If nobody else has any objections or comments, I move to accept the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
It is moved and seconded that we accept the consent agenda as presented. This motion is debatable and amendable and requires majority vote. It is now open for discussion. All those in favor of accepting the consent agenda as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, the motion carries, and we will accept the consent agenda as presented. Consideration and possible action. Next item on your agenda is number 3. Consider and accept the 2020 no new revenue tax rate and voter approval tax rate.
Okay, we've got a few items that we're going through here that are required by the state related to taxes. And one of them is to accept the no new revenue tax rate and voter approval tax rate. For those of you who've been on council, you'll probably realize these are different terms than what you've had in the past. So this item is to acknowledge that the no new revenue tax rate and voter approval tax rates for 2020 are 0.3843 per $100 valuation for the no new revenue rate, and then $0.4525 per $100 valuation for the voter approval tax rate. The no new revenue tax rate is the rate that would collect the same amount of revenue as 2019 from properties taxed in both years, 2019 and 2020. The voter approval tax rate is the highest tax rate that can be adopted without holding an election for voter approval. I prepared the city's draft budget in keeping the tax rate at $0.4000 per $100 valuation, which is what it was in both the years 2018 and 2019. And What I wrote here in the write-up that went out to you is a bit incorrect. You know, I put in here that would raise approximately $50,000 more than the no new revenue rate. It would raise approximately $50,000 more than what was raised last year, but approximately 31,000 of that comes from properties added to the tax roll. And so that's an additional 19,000 from properties that were on the tax roll for both years. So I'd like to clear that up. And Ms. McRae, the county's tax assessor collector, said she'd be available for this meeting. Tammy, are you available? So wasn't sure if she was one of the numbers I didn't recognize here, but.
She had confirmed that she was going to attend.
I'm not sure if she's one of those two numbers that I don't see that are labeled at the bottom of my screen, or if she just is not in attendance. But in any case, you know, for this item, that is the explanation for those items. And so the recommendation is to, you know, accept those rates. Those, if you look at the backup supporting document that went with that, that was supplied by the tax office with Ms. McRae's office. And those items, two items are specified on there as the no new revenue rate and the voter approval tax rate.
So the language really needs to be that we understand that the tax rate that we would have needed to adopt to not bring in a penny more than last year on the same properties that were on the tax roll last year is 0.3843. And the tax rate at which we would have needed to go to an election is 0.4525. So the state doesn't allow us to charge whatever we want. We have to go to the voter if we charge too much,
right,
or over a certain threshold.
Yes, and just to be clear, because this is the way Ms. McRae explained it to me, at the 0.4525, that is the highest rate you could charge without triggering the election. Exceeding that triggers the election.
Right. We're approved up to that amount, right? So.
Right. But you think that we can live within the 0.4000 that we've lived within for the last 2 years?
I do.
Which is well within both of the, well, certainly within the voter approval tax rate, which is what we're calling it now.
Right, and I do believe that, you know, as we move forward to the budget workshop that we'll have in the next week, you know, there are, I have what I believe is a conservative recommendation on sales tax because there's a potential for downward pressure on that, and there's some expenditure cuts in there. There's not, major vehicle purchases that are planned. We do have a number of public works and capital projects that are in there. But I believe what's coming, what you'll be seeing, you'll consider a conservative budget in terms of revenue and expenditures, but one the city can live with and move forward with. And then as we get through these more difficult economic times, we'll be positioned for increases in revenue from the sales tax side.
Right. Well, like you said, there's very little increase in our property tax over last year on the same properties that are on the tax roll. I would guess that a good portion of it is commercially driven. And in any event, the city does not control what people's property tax assessed values are. That's controlled by the appraisal district, which is a county level body that we don't, I guess we can appoint people to, although I believe our nominee was rejected or didn't receive enough votes. So we don't have anyone on that board, that we don't have any representation. So our city council does not control that. Did you say $18,000 or $13,000 increase?
Approximately 19,000.
Okay, we don't control that. It's basically dropped in our lap by the county, and it's one of the smaller taxing entities in the jurisdiction. We're probably the least impact on somebody's property tax increases.
Richard, we normally have our budget workshops for the city, and that's kind of finished by this stage, right?
Well, my experience with the city is a bit limited, and I believe we're doing this in the same order as last year. Yeah, as I've been looking at this, I definitely in the future, I think we should probably try to have the budget workshop earlier so we can have this, in that opposite order. Right now, we're a little bit handcuffed by trying to stay ahead of the state guidelines, but I can assure you, next year, I'll plan to have those budget workshops ahead of this point.
So I think we've kind of hashed this out, especially since we do not control any of the numbers that are discussed here. These are given to us by the county tax assessor. So I move that we accept the 2020 no new revenue tax rate at 0.3843 per $100 and the voter approval tax rate at 0.4525 per $100.
Second.
It is moved and seconded that we accept the 2020 no new revenue tax rate and voter approval tax rate. The no new revenue rate of 0.3843 per 100 and the voter approval tax rate at 0.4525 per 100. This motion is debatable, amendable, and requires majority vote. Is now open for discussion. All those in favor of accepting the 2020 no new revenue tax rate and voter approval tax rate, no new approval at 0.3843 per 100 and voter approval at 0.525 per 100, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, the motion carries, and we will accept the 2020 no new revenue tax rate and voter approval tax rate at 0.3843 per 100 for the no new and 0.525 per 100 for the voter approval.
0.45.
4525, thank you. Next item of business is number 4 on your agenda. Consider and discuss the tax rates needed to fund the 2020-2021 budget for maintenance and operations and debt services.
Okay. And items 4, 5, and 6, are linked. So what I'm about to describe to you, this description really relates to all of them, and I thought it was easier just to kind of present this at one time. And I believe I can do this without being more confusing than I might have to be, while still being clear with regards to what we have to be clear about with the law. And as I said before, some of the procedures related to the tax rate adoption have changed for this year. And so I prepared the city's budget in keeping with the tax rate of 0.40000, which is what it had been in both 2018 and 2019. And I felt that was consistent with the expectations that I've received from past discussions with City Council. And I believe, it also will work within the budget that we will need for this year. As I said before, this will raise approximately $50,000 more than what we had last year. By comparison, the draft budget that will be presented in the upcoming budget workshop will have sales tax revenue projected to be down between $50,000 to $100,000 from the current year that's nearing an end. The proposed split for property taxes for maintenance and operations, I've projected at 0.2805, and for the INS, for interest and services, is 0.1195. Using this split will allow us to utilize some of the surplus funds that have increased in recent years in the debt service funds for debt payments. And some of that increase can then go to the general fund, where we are projecting a decrease in sales tax revenues. Alternatively, if council would rather keep a split closer to what it had last year, it could choose to utilize some of the prior year surplus for the general fund. If it would rather leave the excess funds in the debt service fund for future use. What's happened is and we'll discuss this more a little later, the MEDC fund in past years has been putting money aside into the debt service fund. And that's been part of what's been set up with the MEDC and City Council. And in addition, in the last several years, the INS rate was calculated And it seems to have been applied close to what the INS rate would need to be if there were no outside money coming into the debt service fund. As a consequence, the debt service fund has built up a surplus of over $420,000 that was neither being used to pay debt, or not being used to pay debt, but was just increasing that fund balance. And so what I'm describing here is using that money to pay down some of this debt, and thereby allowing some of the property tax money to go into the property or into the general fund at a higher rate than it had been in last years, to make up for the property tax, the sales tax decreases that we're projecting.
If you
I
left
definitely, oh, go ahead, Randy.
if you left the extra funds in the debt service fund, you could actually go back and get them during the year also, couldn't you? Move it over during the year, transfer it?
Well, once you put the money in the debt service fund, you really should not remove it. What I would like to do in the long term, and we've discussed some of this, with the budget amendment, and I plan to discuss it more in budgeting. If the city wants to build up surpluses for the future, which I very much support, I think it should do that in the general fund. You can always take that money from the general fund and use it to pay debt. You can use it to add to the debt service fund. You can use it to pay for projects. But once you put that money in the debt service fund, you really shouldn't be taking it back out to move to transfer to other funds for other uses.
I'll actually add to that. You cannot take it out once you put it in the debt service fund.
Locked in there. That's right.
One-way street.
Yeah, and so by allowing that fund to just ride and get higher and higher, you've effectively handcuffed yourself. Even if you wanted to do that as part of a plan to use it for certain items, you can still do that from the general fund.
Yeah, the options are better with the first one you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I would also caution against using the surplus because people have historically looked at the surplus of your general fund as a month of operating expenses, and it's like your own personal funds. You should have 6 to 9 to 12 months of savings that you can get to just in case you lose your job or there's a pandemic, I guess. And the city had historically had that, and we had discussions several years ago about how our surplus was too large. And as the city has grown, our surplus has whittled away as a percentage or a number of months. And so it's actually gotten a little bit smaller. So and the environment has gotten much more unstable and uncertain, which means that you probably want a stronger surplus. So doing it this way would mean that again, you have access to funds that are only usable in one way, and you don't spend down the surplus, which is already, I wouldn't say weak, but it's definitely lighter than I would feel comfortable with. And that's something that we can talk about during the budgeting process for going forward. I'd like to slowly add to that when the circumstances are a bit stronger and we're back to confident growth.
What you're saying, Rebecca, is if we do transfer in the general fund, we can earmark it so or label it so where it won't get calculated into our so-called surplus like we do today, right?
No, so what I'm saying is using Richard's greater percentage or use a lower interest in sinking tax rate and a higher maintenance and operations tax rate will naturally draw down our debt service fund, and it will increase the funds that we have available for the 2020-2021 operating budget, which will allow us to leave our surplus alone instead of what he had suggested before, is if we leave the split the same, we could leave the money in the debt service fund, but we might have to draw down our surplus in order to keep operations at the level that we might need to deliver services at the level that we'd like.
So it won't affect the surplus funds in the general fund that we keep for 6 months or a year that we calculate.
Well, so that's right. So the way that he's talking about it, using a lower percentage going to interest and sinking with his 0.1195 suggestion means that more of our current tax dollars are spendable now, which means that you keep more money in the bank for emergencies.
I'm off of that. I always thought we were too low.
Well, we can definitely talk about that later as to what the right number is. But at least this way, it doesn't make things worse.
Right. Thank you.
I guess related to agenda item 4, this, for discussion there, and agenda item 5 is for a vote on it. But are there any other questions related to that?
I mean, I just don't see in this environment that we can raise taxes to keep, the to make up the loss in sales tax, because that's what we've basically been floating on in the past. Is we've got a fairly stable but low percentage of property tax and the bonanza of sales tax, and that is, like Richard said, got downward pressure. So the question is, do we raise taxes on our property taxes to make up for downward pressure on our sales tax? And to me, the answer is no. So, I think keeping it at 0.4 is the only way to go.
And that was the position I tried to take, putting the draft budget together, looking at the tax rate. Difficult economic times, I think you have to be careful about trying to increase the tax load on people who are already challenged. My proposal with the budget that we'll discuss at the workshop is, we have opportunities to make some reductions in expenditures, and I think we can make those without cutting back on services that people are expecting on. But and that's how I came back to these rates. Is it's all part of making the puzzle work together. But I believe it all works, and it will all be satisfactory in the services we provide to people without having to raise the property taxes.
Right, and our tax rate is already quite low compared to other municipalities in the area, and it should be a source of pride. But it also means that it can be difficult to keep it down when things get tight. But I think that, we have the opportunity and the option to do that right now. So it sounds like nobody's arguing with the 0.4. So should we quick vote on number 5 before we forget about it, or?
I think you can move on to onto agenda item number 5 then, if everyone is fully discussed with number 4.
So number 5, consider and vote on the proposed tax rate for 2020.
I move to have a tax rate for fiscal year 2020-2021 at 0.4000 per $100 of assessed value. Do I need to split it into the M&O and INS?
I think it would be best to include that.
Okay, that is split as to 0.2805 for maintenance and operations and 0.1195 for interest and sinking.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that we accept the proposed tax rate for 2020 and 2021. The motion is to accept the tax rate at 0.400 per 100 value, and the split for top property taxes at 0.2805 for M&O and 0.1195 for INS. The INS included there, Becky? I'm sorry.
Yes, 0.1195 for interest and sinking.
Yep. Okay, great. This motion is debatable, admissible, requires majority vote. It is now open for discussion.
I had that as Tom Cronin with a second.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I was the second.
Thank you.
Now it says we need to do a roll call vote. So does Sarah call us individually then?
Yes.
All right. Andy Burley.
Yes.
Rebecca Haas.
Aye.
Tom Cronin.
Aye.
Kevin Lacey,
Aye.
TJ Wilkerson.
Aye.
We have a majority vote of aye, and the motion passes. Next item of business on your agenda is number 6. Consideration and determine the tax rate needed to fund the city of Montgomery 2020 and 2021 FY budget. If it exceeds this year, no new revenue tax rate. Schedule a public hearing to be held on September 15th, 2020 at 6 p.m. via Zoom.
Okay. Yeah, since we are exceeding the no new revenue rate, then the appropriate action would be to call for that hearing as specified as a public hearing for September 15th, 2020 at 6 p.m. via Zoom.
And hopefully by then we'll have the full budget as well so that we can discuss that with our constituents and give them, I mean, even if we weren't required, I think it's a good idea to give them an idea of what we've done and why.
I definitely expect we will have that worked through by then.
I move to schedule a public hearing for the tax rate discussion because we are at 0.400 per 100, and which is above the no new revenue rate of 0.3843. This is to be scheduled for September 15th, 2020 at 6 p.m. via Zoom.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that we accept the tax rate. It has been moved that we schedule a public hearing to be held on September 15th, 2020 at 6 p.m. via Zoom regarding the tax rate, continuing at 0.400. And because we are not over the...
Because we are over
the above no new revenue rate of 0.3843. This motion is debatable, amendable, and requires majority vote. It is now open for discussion. All those in favor of approving of scheduling a public hearing to be held on September 15th, 2020 at 6 p.m. via Zoom, discuss the tax rate staying at 0.4000 because of the rate is above the no new revenue rate of 0.3843. Say aye. Or is this also okay? Is this also an individual, or is this a cumulative vote?
It's cumulative.
Alan, does it need to be individual, or can it be cumulative?
You have to have each person's record.
Okay, all right. Well, with that, then Kevin Lacey,
Aye.
TJ Wilkerson,
Aye.
Tom Cronin,
Aye.
Becky Haas,
Aye.
Randy Burley. Ayes have it, the motion carries. Next item of business is number 7 on your agenda. Receive a presentation on the annual service and assessment plan for the city of Montgomery, District number 1.
Okay, Mallory Craig from the Coach Rose Law Firm is attending the meeting tonight, or at least intending to attend, so I hope that she's here and I ask for her in a moment. The total assessed value of the properties for this item is $38,814.40. The city has an agreement with the City of Montgomery Public Improvement District number 1. And, as part of this agreement, we have, we will return the tax money to them, and with a small amount for servicing, for us to do that. Ms. Craig, are you here to present the information?
Yes, sir. I'm right here.
All right, there you are. Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, Council. I'm Mallory Craig from Coates Rose. Some of you might remember me from last year or the year before when I've presented these annual service and assessment plan updates. As I understand, there's a couple of new members on the board from last year. So I was asked to come on and give a little presentation about the update and just the PID in general. If you recall, this PID was created in 2015 and we first levied an assessment in 2017. The assessment runs for 15 years. And each year that, or for each tract that is triggered, the city includes a $50 administrative fee. So this year, since there are 9 tracts triggered, the city will receive $450 of the total assessment levied. And this is a total pass-through PID, meaning that all of the assessments that are collected minus the $450 are then returned to the developer to pay for the infrastructure that was constructed to serve the Montgomery Summit Business Park. There are 16 tracks. As I said, there are 19 that are triggered. One new track was triggered for this year, and we're expecting maybe in 2021 to have a couple more. So this is continuing to increase. They're getting some more business and some more tenants. So yeah, the assessments, as Richard's statement, are $38,814.40. Are there any questions about the PID, or can I provide any other information?
I had 2.
Okay.
The first one was, I think you already answered it. This PID is for 15 years total?
Yes, correct. So it's
from
the date it was triggered. So it's not
Okay.
2030, it's from 2017, so 2032.
Okay, the second question was, I know you just added one this year, and you're talking about adding some more. Now, will those start to trigger the 15 years for those tracks? Or is it 15 years total?
No, it's 15 years total from the first year it was triggered on. So it's 15 years or until the developer is reimbursed. So if they get fully reimbursed, if they get all of their tracks and all of the assessments equal out to what they've expended, then the reimbursements would end. But if it gets to 15 years and they haven't been reimbursed, then it ends.
So it's your advantage to get it done quick.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
And we are keeping up with that, or are the overcheck's keeping up with that? Are you keeping up with that? Who is monitoring that?
Monitoring which part?
Sorry, the payments. And if we are able to, if we end up paying early, or if we go the whole 15.
So I keep up with part of it, and then I believe the city also keeps up with it too. So we kind of have, so it's usually around March, between March and May, that I send in a request for a reimbursement, and then in that I include what has already been dispersed and then what we have left to be reimbursed. And so we can all make sure we're on the same page of what's left.
And from that point, we review the information, verify the taxes were paid before we would refund them. And if there's any issues that we might disagree on, then we have the ability to circle back and discuss that to work through the issues before we finalize it and make payment.
Correct. Can I answer any other questions?
Nope, it's very clear. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, well then I'll make the motion. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna make the motion, but go ahead, Kevin. My voice is.
Yeah, no, I see you're making all of them. Yeah, I move to accept and approve the city and assessment plan as presented with the PID. City agreement with the PID. Sorry.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that we accept the annual service and assessment plan as presented with the for the PID. This motion is debatable, amendable, and requires majority vote. It is now open for discussion. All those in favor of accepting the annual service and assessment plan for the city of Montgomery PID as discussed, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. The ayes have it. The motion carries, and we will accept the annual service and assessment plan as presented regarding the PID. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mallory.
Thank you so much. You guys have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
You too.
Thank you.
Item number 8 on your agenda, consideration of possible action regarding adoption of the following ordinance. In ordinance of the City Council of the City of Montgomery accepting and approving an annual update to the service and assessment plan and assessment role for City of Montgomery Public Improvement District Number 1, providing for payment of the annual installment of the assessments in accordance with Chapters 372.
Didn't we just do that one?
Here's the down.
Yeah.
No, we just did number 7. Oh,
And 8.
And 8. Sorry. I apologize. All right, number 9 on your agenda. Consideration of possible action regarding adoption of the following resolution. A resolution of the City of Montgomery, Texas, affirming its annual review of the policy for investment of municipal funds and the investment strategies contained therein has been conducted as required by Section 2256.005E of the Texas Government Code.
All right, thank you. Attached are the resolution, an amended investment policy, including appointment of investment officer, and the updated list of authorized brokers for 2020 for your review. This is an item upon which City Council is required to act each year. There's a change in the investment officer, which is noted in the attached policy, where Gia Lewis replaces Catherine Turner as one of the city's investment officers, and they're through municipal accounts. And also the list of authorized brokers is updated. The investment policy was provided by municipal accounts and was reviewed by the city attorney. I would like to add for reference, so everyone on council understands that, it's been I think it's been about 6 months since we brought, someone on staff to handle the city's bookkeeping. Ultimately, in the long term, I do expect that when he's received the required training, we'll probably move to where we can appoint Anthony on staff to be the investment officer. And I'll still, and if not him or someone else who we can use in place of municipal accounts who may not be as costly in the long run. And that's something, again, we'll discuss as we come up to the budget. But I did want to point that out to council as well with this item since it's pertinent.
I was going to say, I do have some heartburn using somebody that, we are no longer really engaged with to do something that we don't actually have any verification that they're doing anything at all in our interest. There's a list of investments that, any idiot could really maintain, or you could get from TML, which we already pay for. It just seems like, we have no verification that they're actually working for us or monitoring this on our behalf.
Well, as with any consultant, obviously there's always an element of trust. Hey, at the moment, Anthony, doesn't have the Public Funds Investment Act training, so he's not prepared to be trained as investment officer. That is something that we're in the process of adjusting and getting him that training, which he should have before the end of the next month.
Right, but he has been aggressive in terms of talking about what appropriate investments are, being concerned about how our investments have been maturing and things like that. I mean, it seems like he has been very proactive, whereas I don't know that we've gotten any communication from our chief investment officer on these items at all. Yeah. So that's my comment, and 50,000 cents on the matter is that somebody who is not engaged as our CIO has been operating in a much more proactive manner than somebody who is getting paid for said behavior.
Yeah. I do understand your comment on the matter.
Is this something that we would have to wait till next year's budget to make the change as far as goes, or when Anthony's up and going, we could put
the council could make that change at any time in the future.
Anytime. Okay. No pressure, Anthony.
And my only comment, which I've made before, is that I do prefer checks and balances. If he's preparing our books and is the CIO, then, we might need to have some sort of thing in place where, there's just an extra, look monthly or something like that, where somebody has a second set of eyes on it, which never hurts in municipal finance.
Yeah. And I would also want someone available, not just necessarily available as a second set of eyes, but someone who, if there was an emergency that drew Anthony away for an extended period, someone who could assist us in the day-to-day operations from that end for a short period. And so that is also on my mind, of being able to have both of those filled.
Right. I mean, it's been wonderful having him here full time, not just from a budgetary perspective, which has been a bonanza, but I mean, his work ethic is fantastic and the quality is even better. But having a one-man band in such a critical area of the city's operation is definitely something to consider in terms of risk.
Yes.
for, you know, if he goes on, you know, an extended vacation even.
Has it always been this way?
No, because we used to use municipal accounts, and they had other people, and so there was allegedly backup, although that had its own shortcomings because the backup was fairly useless.
Yeah.
So we paid a lot, got some, and had backup, but it was limited.
And in addition to what I believe is better service by having Anthony on staff, you know, ultimately, I believe it's also less cost to the city. And so I think we win on both ends.
We do. We just have to consider not necessarily succession planning, but cross-training.
Right.
What do we need to say here?
So what we're looking for is approval, approval of the investment policy, the naming of the investment officer, and I guess you have the language there under the recommendation as written out. So
you could move to adopt the resolution and read the resolution blurb that's right there in the recommendation, Kevin.
I'll do it. Okay, move to adopt the resolution of the City of Montgomery, Texas, affirming its annual review of the policy for investment of municipal funds and the investment strategies contained therein has been conducted as required by section 2256.005E of the Texas Government Code.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that we adopt the resolution of the City of Montgomery, Texas, affirming its annual review of the policy for investment of municipal funds and the investment strategies contained therein has been conducted as required by section 2256.05E of the Texas Government Code. This motion is debatable, amendable, and requires a majority vote. It is now open for discussion. All those in favor of adopting the resolution of the City of Montgomery, affirming its annual review of the policy for investment of municipal funds and the investment strategies contained therein has been conducted as required by section 2256.05E of the Texas Government Code, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The motion carries, and we will accept the resolution of the City of Montgomery, Texas, affirming its annual review of the policy for investment of municipal funds and the investment strategies contained therein has been conducted as required by section 2256.005E of the Texas Government Code. Next item of business on your agenda is item number 10, update from BGE regarding the General Land Project Limited Master Drainage Study.
okay, we have Bill Cotlin from BGE here to present this update. So Bill.
Hey, good evening, everybody. It's great to be with you this evening. I'll try to be brief because I know you have a full agenda and give you some time to ask questions. BGE has done a hydrology and hydraulic study on Town Creek and Town Creek Tributary number 1, which is the little tributary of Town Creek that crosses Ples Morgan Drive and runs up across 149 and MLK next to the Lincoln Elementary School and goes up to 1097 from there. And the purpose of that study was to identify locations with constrictions or problems that could be addressed to attempt to reduce funding through your grant program. And so we have done that study, and we've identified 3 items that are issues that we think need to be addressed. One item is the area between FM 149 and MLK along the creek channel there. And I tell you what, let me share my screen with you. You guys have the report, but I'm just going to pull it up on the screen if I can figure out how to do that correctly. Hopefully you can see this this picture here.
Yes.
And the area that I'm talking about is right here where this arrow is, just between 149 and MLK. There's an area of thick underbrush and trees there that is restricting the flow in the creek. And so that's one of the things that we found that is a cause for the water level in the creek to be higher and contributes to flooding. A second item is right at 149. There are two 54-inch culverts there that are much smaller than the culvert that's at MLK and much smaller than the culvert at Ples Morgan. And so those are also a constrictor of flow there, such that when we did the study, we found that the 2-year storm would roll over the top of FM 149, and of course the 100-year storm, which was the second storm we looked at, what I call the old 100-year storm, which is what the floodplain maps are based off of. And we also looked at what's called the Atlas 14 100-year storm, which is how that was changed after Hurricane Harvey. And so all of those go over the top of 149 there. And so those are two of the items we found. And another item that we found was that there has been significant erosion, which you guys are all aware of, downstream along Town Creek from Buffalo Springs Bridge all the way up to the confluence of these two creeks, Trib 1 and Town Creek. And it actually goes a little further up towards Ples Morgan and a little further down Town Creek towards Lone Star Parkway. And let me show you another little figure. This is a profile of the creek bottom. The bottom part of this is Town Creek, and this upper part here is Town Creek Trib 1. And you see this place here where the bottom falls off. It's like a waterfall there. And that's at basically the place where the erosion ends. The bottom of this creek used to basically be about this level here, all the way down to the bridge. And there was a concrete slope paving on the side there, and there was a big storm that washed that out and basically eroded all of this out. All this soil here kind of came out and went downstream. And and so that's continuing to work its way upstream. This little waterfall here is just basically moving its way upstream. We call that a head cut. Because basically the velocity of the water as it goes over that thing is such that it keeps eroding. The bottom of the stream away, and so you can see that if we go back up into this deal here, you can see where the floodplain used to be nice and wide through here because the channel was shallow, and now the whole floodplain and floodway is within the channel because the channel is so deep, and we'll see that again in just a second. And that's moving its way towards this road and this road, which would possibly undercut those roads, which is why I pointed out that erosion continues because there continues to be this sort of what I might call waterfall condition.
So why would we want to increase velocity by making more straws under the road, by cutting brush? Doesn't faster water cause more erosion?
Faster water does cause more erosion. One of the reasons why, when you see in our recommendations that we had the cutting the brush and we had the opening up of the culvert, but we also had a detention pond. The purpose of the detention pond was to mitigate the opening of the culvert there and mitigate that situation. The total amount of water coming down the creek will still be coming down the creek, so it's not going to really increase the velocity by much. But the reason that we had also a recommendation to put in some kind of structures downstream to stop the head cut was also to stop the erosion. So since I started talking about the solutions, so there's 4 solutions. One was to cut out the underbrush and possibly do some channel improvements, as we discussed just a second ago. Another was to open up the culvert or make a small bridge on FM 149. The third was to do a little detention pond to mitigate the increase in flow from the first 2 improvements. And the fourth was to do some kind of improvements to stop the head cut situation. That would probably be drop structures in the channel. The second improvement, which is FM 149, is probably a state improvement and not a city improvement. So that's going to be something that you'll have to work with the state on, and probably won't be doing yourself or spending your grant money on. And the fourth improvement is really more of a private developer improvement, that your city engineer will work with your developers as they develop that project to mitigate what they're doing by stopping that head cut that is coming up that channel. And so, but there are two things there that are potential projects for the grant project. So just to kind of go through the other drawings here real quick, this is a cross section showing the two small culverts at 149 on the tributary there. And you can see here, these blue lines are where the water level is for the 2, the 100 and the Atlas 14, where it's going over 149 at the culverts there. This is just a heat map of the topography, so you can see where the actual washout is. These canals were built to, this one here, and then this one coming out to where the Buffalo Springs Bridge is, and there was this little turning basin here. And essentially the waterfall that was at that turning basin has moved upstream all the way to this point over here, and it's continuing to move. So that kind of shows that for you. So anyway, right now what our next steps are is that we are evaluating those options and running the model for future conditions with those options to confirm what effect they will have. And then we will be putting together some high-level cost estimates for those options in a report to be turned into the GLO. Any other questions?
Yeah, I had a couple. Go ahead.
In terms of placement of your detention, is that private property as well?
Yeah, so the place where we were thinking about doing detention would be on private property between Ples Morgan and FM 149. It could be placed also on private property on the upstream side of 149 if we're not able to work out some sort of a deal to get property from the developer downstream of 149.
If you did it upstream from 149, then you wouldn't have to worry about the under 149 fixing under that, because that would take care of that. If you detained upstream from there, we wouldn't have to work with that.
The constriction is quite a bit. It's pretty small. I mean, comparative to the other crossings, and so it is. We could improve the situation by putting some volume upstream of that constriction without removing it, but I don't think that that's going to be we're going to be able to get enough volume to really bring down the water surface significantly without opening it up.
Okay, just yeah. I mean, because in some ways it's sort of nice to have that as a constrictor. It's like an extra weir almost.
Right. So that if the 2-year flow wasn't going over the top of the road, I think you could argue that, hey, it's great to have that, but what's happening is that the flow is actually going over the road anyway, because the difference between the extreme event and the capacity of those culverts is a lot. And so that water is actually going over the road anyway. And so by leaving that constrictor in there, we're not necessarily stopping that from happening. But if we can get it across the road and arrest that erosion downstream and provide the detention to mitigate it, there's plenty of capacity in that washed out channel to carry that flow within the channel banks down to the lake.
Right. I'm just thinking of private property and how valuable it is. And it seems like between 149 and Ples Morgan is commercial and reasonably valuable.
Yeah, there's a little pond there already in that spot that's between Ples Morgan and 149, and most of that is not fronting on one of those roads, and so I think it could be worked out with that developer to identify an area there to do that. Certainly, I don't know I can't speak for the developer as to what compensation they would want. But I think that that's a workable solution there that they should be able to be cooperative on. But as you say, if they're not, there's an option of doing the same thing in a different place.
Can you dig out something like that and make it an actual, like, adding value water feature? Okay. So even though we're talking about large quantities of stormwater, you can turn it into an amenity.
Right. We do that a lot with detention ponds these days, is basically dig them deeper so that they have water always in them in a fountain or something like that, so that they are pleasing to look at, and plant different types of vegetation around them to make them more like a park.
Right, because the kids from A&M that did from the landscape architectural class, some of their less viable ideas, but more interesting ones, did have adding quite a bit of natural looking features that, had water on it. And it was surprising, if you looked at what then they put around it, the value that it seemed like they were adding to the real estate by having a water feature in there, like, legitimate lake, where there isn't obviously a lake that looked like what was in their pictures.
Yeah, we've been involved in private developments with different landscape architects where we've done basically the design of the stormwater part of it, and then they have created lakes or rivers or even wetland type environments that with bridges and pathways and different kinds of vegetation that create a really nice habitat, as well as it's beautiful, and it fulfills a stormwater function. Obviously, those things cost money and cost maintenance, but that's very typical these days for developers to put that extra value in there for their customers.
Because it seems like that might be a solution if we're looking at valuable commercial land that somebody's not going to want to give up. Plus, I'm not sure that detention versus, the kind of concept that we were just talking about is more of a retention. You want to keep the water and, not have it, creating these, cutting waterfalls. That might be a more viable long-term solution.
Right, but I want to emphasize that the waterfall, the velocity or the amount of water is not what's causing the erosion, it's the elevation difference. So what happened was that was a natural creek all the way, down to Walden Road at one time. And they dug channels to bring Lake Conroe closer. And as they dug those channels, they kept increasing the distance between the natural creek elevation and the water level of Lake Conroe, which is fixed. And the further out they dug that channel, the more that elevation increased. And they tried to mitigate that by putting concrete up there to stop erosion. But the amount of water coming down there was had more energy than what that concrete could absorb. And so it washed it out. And so it's really the elevation difference that is causing the erosion, not an increase in the amount of water. Because really most of this watershed, I think we came up with 10% impervious area. It's not developed. So that part hasn't really changed over the years. It's just that these canals created this waterfall condition that then eroded.
Okay.
Hello, Bill. I had a couple of questions.
Sure, Andy.
This project, doesn't it go all the way back to 149 for the propane tanks? Isn't that where it starts from? So
we actually studied all the way up to 1097 along that road. So yeah, 149 and the propane tanks is kind of in the study area, yes, sir.
Well,
but Ray, to answer your question, so that's the propane tanks off of 149 south of Lone Star Parkway. That's on the main reach of Town Creek, and this study really focused on Trib 1 which heads up, also known as Anders Branch, that heads up to 1097. So that wasn't the main focus of this due to the GLO funding being focused on improving the Baja, MLK, Simonton Lawson corridor.
But not only do you have the problem where you just mentioned the water runs over the road at 149 by the propane tanks, it's just as bad. I thought it was in the project or the scope.
We studied, we had to study that part of the creek in order to get, to evaluate the lower part of the creek. But the purpose of the study was to reduce flooding along the tributary.
Okay, because in the section I'm talking about, past the propane tanks, there is a large pipe. You can actually walk across the creek that sits in the creek bed. And the creek is totally plugged up with large tree trunks. It's been that way for years. And what happens when we have good rain, every good rain, the water cannot flow. It chokes the creek off. So it runs out of the banks, under the propane tanks, south of the creek, almost to Anna Springs, where it dead ends. And then it comes back in the creek bed right before the bypass bridge. So that is got a really bad choke point there, which actually makes when water run across 105 because it doesn't let it flow. It restricts the flow. The second point is also is another bad choke point, which is north of Lone Star Bypass Bridge. There's a little dog leg, and you see it in your first map you showed, a little blue, where it makes like a little dog leg there. The choke point is right there. The creek bed is full of timber. I'm not sure if y'all can see that from the air or whatever, but it's got, that's one point. And then the one I just mentioned was kind of, but you know, if you go down Anna Springs and go straight down to the creek, of course, it's grown up pretty good now. Those two are really bad areas on that creek that choke the water back.
So to answer your question, Randy, you know, on the north side of Lone Star Parkway and the improvements of that channel, that's something that definitely will be looked at as the developer continues his plans for that part. On the south side, so as part of TxDOT's 149 improvements project, they have in their scope to not, Catherine can tell me if I say this correctly, but to not increase the size of the culvert underneath, which I know is not what you're saying is the problem, but to provide parallel boxes to 149, kind of where Bill's mouse is, to be able to provide some storage underneath and adjacent to the street. Now, you know, as far as the choke point downstream, that's something that, you know, I think we can get Mike to take a look at and get with the property owner to see if that's something they can do to help out.
Yeah, I think before most of y'all time, you might have been here, Chris, I don't know, way back in the maybe 2010, the city got maybe the county or somebody to come in and help clear the creek bed, the timber that was in the creek on that west side of 149 back west, but they didn't do anything from the propane tanks east. They just left it like as it was. It's been that way for years.
Right. I know a couple years ago after, I guess it was post Harvey, when the National Guard came in, they worked on that west side. And then they also worked on Anders Branch to get some of the debris out. But it was, I think they had 2 days here and what they got done, and that was it. I believe that was 2017, 2018 timeframe.
Yeah. Now, Bill, you know, I guess you're aware, I guess you probably remember that the developer actually built those 5 ponds along the side of the creek. So hopefully he would be wanting to maybe enlarge them like Rebecca talked about, because I think he built them to enhance the value of his property, which I don't blame him for. But hopefully they may be able to be in the solution also, as far as maybe making them a little bit bigger and a little deeper to hold some extra water.
Yeah, I think there is a real opportunity to cooperate, with the developer and come up with a way that he could develop his green belt through there in a way to actually do the mitigation, not necessarily right there by Ples Morgan, but it could be all along that Town Creek there, and utilizing those ponds as you mentioned, Randy.
So what are the next steps for us in regard to, planning and acting on this study?
Well, as I mentioned, the next steps on the study is to complete the study and get to GLO and get them to approve it. And I think the purpose for that is to identify projects that you guys can fund with GLO money and actually get done. And those projects might include some work upstream of 149 there to clear out some underbrush and possibly a few trees that are in the way. There's some restrictions that we're going to find out from GLO about because we can't work in the bottom of the creek with this money, but we want to find out just exactly what the dimensions of that are, if it's the whole floodway or just the actual creek bed. The second one that I think could be funded through this is some sort of cooperative contribution to doing something on, as a detention to mitigate opening the 149 culvert. Then I think the other thing to do is a secondary thing is to work with TxDOT as they upgrade their road there to demonstrate to them the need to improve that culvert there, and also to work with the developer to demonstrate to them the need to stop the erosion with some structures in the creek there. So some things that you can do directly right away, and other things are going to be more of a cooperative long-term goal.
And that's correct. So the funding for the grant is already, the contract's been signed with the city. So once this is done, the final scope of the drainage improvements will be ready to go forward. In that grant, there is money for some land acquisition cost, land/easement, depending on what actually is needed and final. As part of the FM 149 improvements that TxDOT's planning to go forward with in the next few years, I think 2024 is the current let date, is trying to get them to put the culvert improvements in there. Since with the GLO, we would be restricted to having to put a bridge structure in. If we can get and use this study to support to TxDOT that they need to improve that crossing as part of their scope, and then be able to use the funds instead of putting toward that crossing toward the pond or contributing to erosion or some other features, we can do that. When we asked originally TxDOT if they would improve that, they had their own study that told them they did not need to. But now with this, we have a backing and a study to take back to them and say, please reevaluate this. Here's this most recent study updated for all the Atlas 14 numbers that shows that this definitely is an issue that we would like TxDOT to take care of. So,
Chris, has that caused flooding in the area in the past because of it?
Yes. So, this is, one of the areas in the homes back there. Luckily, we didn't have in the past structure flooding, but it got very close to some of those homes that back up to Andrews Branch. So, the goal here is to be able to reduce that impact on those residents with these funds. So, I think what Bill found in the study was, obviously the choke point at 149, which is kind of what was assumed, but also then kind of putting final sizes and scopes to it, which is kind of what they're working on now, as well as getting clarification from the GLO on exactly what we can and cannot do with their funds to be able to get as much improvement we can now, and then try to get it to stretch even further if we can get TxDOT to participate across it.
In the meantime, what can we do to, I'm familiar with what Randy's talking about, all the debris that's, in a few different spots is causing a separate choking issue, if you will. What can we do in the meantime to remedy that?
I think the first step is we'll, get out there, take a look, document it, and then get with the landowner. We know who the landowner is, and he's developing a lot of land in the city. So we can talk with him and see if there's something that he could do to help clean that out. or, at a minimum give, access to be able to have some of that done, obviously depending on the scope of how much is back there.
I was going to say, don't forget that the big restriction when we were doing some cleanup on Anders Branch was that a lot of it was on private property. So
Right.
we were really restricted. Even when we had the National Guard helping, we couldn't get stuff done.
And I pulled up the plat while I was sitting here, and it appears for the because that corner property that it covers the corner of 149 and Lone Star Parkway, and it kind of wraps around the propane tank site, was all platted with Buffalo Springs. And there's appears to be a drainage easement that covers the creek. So at least we have some right to be able to get there. It's not a responsibility, but more of a right with an easement access. But we'll look into it and get with the property owner to see what options we have to get something done quicker.
Yeah, I see this project being the biggest challenge is working with their independent property owners to come to a common solution.
Correct.
I have to say it nicely.
Well, and again, when we were dealing with the National Guard, the property owners were interested in having things happen, but at least for Anders Branch, they didn't have the money to make it happen. So it all comes down to that. We didn't have the ability to use government funds on private property. It is not, using taxpayer dollars to improve private property is very difficult to do. So that is a problem that has to be dealt with.
Correct. And so in the budget originally, we had in there, and part of the scope was to acquire easements. The thought was at least from MOK to 149 along the Anders Branch. So we have that right to be there and have that easement. And then as far as, the pond goes, again, depending on the final sizing, layout, et cetera, a lot of, if the pond's able to kind of squeeze onto the existing pond, a lot of that's already floodplain. So it's not as usable and developable property being behind the pond in floodplain. But again, we'll just have conversation with those property owners to see what they would be willing to participate in to ultimately get the goal of improving the area.
But, and you need to be careful as well. We don't necessarily want to buy a lot of stuff because it's like Bickford's old free horse analogy, because once you own it, then you own it. So, that's something to consider long-term in terms of responsibility and cost of maintenance. We definitely need to be sure that we understand that long-term cash flow outflow.
Right.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Bill.
So I don't think we need to vote on this.
Thank you.
This is an update, right? No voting?
Correct.
That's correct.
It was an excellent update. Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, thanks for your input.
It's an important one.
Sarah, you're on mute.
No wonder nobody could hear me. Okay. I get talking. You'll just talk over me. Number 11 on your agenda. Consideration of possible action on department reports. A, City Administrator's Report. Richard?
Okay, I'm going to go through at least the majority of the staff reports here. I realize we're 80 minutes into the meeting, so I'm going to go through this and hit the high points. If there's something important that anyone thinks I missed, by all means, either bring it to my attention, or we can also ask that department head, because they're on the line as well. So with that, we've been following the COVID cycle. It's gone up, it's gone down, back up, gone down. We're at a point now where we may continue down, or we may be going back up, but we're still operating, full services and full hours of operations for the public. We're taking precautions, to both for the part of the public and for the parts of staff, to operate as safely and completely as possible. And we will continue to do that, as long as is necessary. The intersection of Baja and MLK, that work was completed to widen that intersection out. And, they made sure that we kept a good drainage flow in that area, as well as widening out both sides of that intersection. I believe it is much safer for people who are driving out there now than it had been. If you haven't seen it recently and are out and about, I would encourage you to go take a look. You can certainly tell the difference in what it was and what it is now just by looking at it. That comes at a good time because we have several homes under construction on that road, down Baja at this time, including one at the corner of Baja and MLK. And I'll circle back to that in a moment with another topic item. We set the budget workshop dates for this coming Thursday, as well as the 31st for this coming Monday. Certainly with the hurricane coming, we'll be keeping an eye on that Thursday date and as well. And we're also at the city, keeping an eye on the hurricane and the projected paths and forecast. For the last couple of days, it seems to have Hurricane Laura now, it's been angling more our direction. We'll keep our eyes on that. We're not expecting as much a rain event as a heavy wind and storm event. That with the damage options that those bring, potentially needing clearing of roads, people with problems potentially in home areas, outages of power, which also reverberates into our ability to provide services, including on the utility side. We do have generators and we have extra fuel set aside. So we believe we're as ready as we're going to be in storm preparation, and we will continue to monitor that as we go through this event. I also wanted to add that I was elected and has been to my first meeting with the Montgomery County Emergency Communications District from the other cities. And so I will continue in that realm, both through the remainder of the vacant term as well as the new term on that. As I mentioned, some of the home construction on Baja earlier, one of those homes under construction is part of the home grant program. And that one is moving along nicely. I believe it's part of an update that appeared on the city's Facebook page earlier today. If you haven't seen it, I'd encourage you to look at that. Right now, we've got 4 homes that are in the permitting process. One of them being that one that's under construction through the home grant. 3 of those permits have been approved for construction. One I anticipate will be approved in the next week. And the reason that one is farther behind is just that it had some delays, and so it's been lagging the other ones. But it's been approved with the program, and so now it's just in the process of getting those plans approved. With regards to that that resident, I spoke to her earlier today, and so she is fully aware of where she is in the process. With regards to Public Works, some of their highlights, I know you have their report. On Liberty at Montgomery Elementary School, there was a 3-inch water main that was repaired. They modified safety ends of the culvert at Berkeley to improve drainage. Faucets in City Hall were replaced with touchless models, and that's part of our response for both the staff and public related to the COVID pandemic. They were able to perform an in-house auto repair on the truck engine mounts, with the crew that we have. So that's one example of the city staff being able to perform some work that might otherwise cost more to have contract out, and they're able to do that on our time. If you've been near Cedar Break Park recently, you've seen that some of the wooden bollards for parking barriers there have been painted with Texas flag theming. That was part of our next step in getting color out in the city, as well as in keeping with the city's heritage as the birthplace of the Texas flag. Fernland reported 553 visitors and 32 guided tours during the month. With the police department, the main highlight I want to report is their online traffic reporting form is available on the city website. If you going to the city website, choose the police department page. On that page, you have the ability to report for traffic. In that way, residents could report any traffic issue at any time, and allow the police department to look into what is necessary on that. And that's part of their efforts to try to be more responsive to the community. Also, right now, they've been mostly today and some yesterday assessing their needs for the hurricane as well. With court, I don't have any specific updates other than court is back on their regular session schedule. And in the utility, Well, the primary thing I want to report there is that we have cleared the arrears numbers. You now show 10 accounts in 120 plus days, and those represent accounts that are on payment plans. And so that should be the normal case now going forward. It wouldn't be normal for anyone to be on a payment plan that long, but in particular cases, I would be willing to approve payment plans up to 6 months. And if they're on it that long, they're either, they're more than likely someone that is making satisfactory progress with us, for an unusual situation. And there were around $25,000 worth of accounts that we have an appointment coming up with a collections company about, working on collection of those older account monies. The amount that was in that category previously was a larger dollar amount, as those accounts that are now going to be set for collections were reviewed. There were a number of fees that were carried through incorrectly in the past. There were accounts that should have been closed and were allowed to continue to assess fees that before they were closed at a later time, and then those amounts remained on the account. So that's why there's a difference in the amounts that you remember previously and what you see there now. And then the last thing I want to report on the utility is we're going to restart the community center rentals in September. We will be advising groups that there is some use at your own risk related to COVID pandemic. We do, city staff does ensure, based on the deposits we've collected, that people have cleaned the place, but we are advising them that we're not coming through and doing a full-scale disinfection job on the building. And so that is something they need to take into account if they want to rent that. We are also renting out pavilion space for those who would like to have a space, such as at Cedar Break Park, but they would rather have an outdoor environment because they feel that's safer. There is that option for people. I know I rolled through those pretty quickly, trying to be respectful of everyone's time, but if there's something specific you have for either myself or the department, that certainly I'm not trying to prevent you from asking those questions. I'd be welcome to take those.
Richard, quick question. What's the latest with that wall in front of the community center?
And I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear that full question there, Kevin.
And what's the latest with the wall in front of the community center?
We're waiting on payment from the insurance company on that, and then I'll be looking at some contractors for some options on that. We had some internal discussion. TxDOT will be coming through and widening that road in the future, and while that's not imminent, I do have some concerns that while now part of that wall is damaged, ultimately it might be in the city's best interest to look at moving that wall inward from its current location. While that's something I would have been hesitant to discuss while the wall was just there in its, shall we say, natural or original state. If we're going to have to do work on that wall anyway, this may be the best time to address that. I think, and I think then we can also take additional steps to repair the wall in case, as I said, not just widening, but there will be additional traffic on that road. That wall will always be at risk of someone coming around that curve, potentially losing control, such as what happened apparently to cause this damage. I think, we may look at taking some additional steps if we could move it back and put up some barrier space, maybe have some parking space there that's created. I think ultimately that accomplishes several goals for the city while still being able to protect the wall long term.
So as soon as we get that payment, we can add that to the agenda and talk about next steps.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Cool, thank you.
It makes sense, since it's 3/4 gone, to make a permanent solution given what our future needs are.
And that's what our thought is here. And so I think, this isn't the opportunity that I would have wanted to have to solve that, but it's certainly the best opportunity we're going to have and not have to spend money twice.
Yeah, let's not fix it just to move it again in the 2 years or so. Right.
Yes.
And just to add, it is taking a little bit longer because they're subrogating for the complete amount from the driver. So our insurance will take out our deductible, but we'll get that back when they get done with the subrogation.
Yeah. Good.
Hey, Richard, I did have a comment maybe for the future on the chart for the city account consumption on the water, the city water.
Yes,
You have a
sir.
nice chart there, but there's two of them, Memory Park and the Cooling Tower values are so large that the rest of them are just really useless. You can't make out what they're better or less. So you may want to have two charts, one for the two high users or whatever, where it's, if you're trying to show it a little differently. This is a suggestion.
I'll work on that.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I definitely see your point on that one.
It's a good visual though.
All right. Yeah, thank you. I think we can address that next month. Were there any other questions? If not, then I'll pass on to Gulf as the next item.
E on your agenda, utility, no, sorry, F on your agenda, water report.
Hello, everyone. We have your July operations report. As Richard was doing, I'll try to hit the highlights. If you go down to page 3, we have your district alerts. All these were just minor issues. We were able to go out and reset equipment. I did notice that on July 10th, lift station 9 pump failure didn't give you a resolution. Whenever the operator arrived on site, they found that all the pumps were operating normally. So most likely it was a temporary malfunction. Page 4 is your wastewater flow detail. We recorded 5,035,000 gallons for the month. Daily peak flow was 399,000 gallons on July 25th. And our daily average flow was 167,800 gallons, which is 42% of your permitted capacity. Page 5 is your effluent monitor report. All samples were in compliance for the month of July, and we recorded a total of 4.75 inches of rain. Below that is your digital rain gauge. Page 6 is your water report. We pumped a total of 13.246 million gallons. We had a total of 217,000 gallons flushing, and we sold a total of 11,931,000, giving us a 92% accountability. That is a little bit lower, but I expected that to rebound back after last month's 104%. So that averages out to your normal accountability.
Hey, Michael, quick question. Since it's been so stinking hot, should we be pumping more water out of well 2 so that everyone gets a little bit cooler water out of their faucets?
We have been pumping water out of well 3 to counteract well 4 at the plant to try to keep the temperature down. We haven't been receiving any temperature issues, and everything's as aesthetically pleasing as we can get it out of water plant 3. Have you all noticed any spike in temperature?
Yeah, it's been warming up in
wouldn't say
for mine. Mine has.
I wouldn't say a spike. I mean, I'm not wilting lettuce, but you know, I wouldn't say I'm also using my hot water heater at all.
That's
okay.
I would say that I've had less hot water this summer than I've had in previous summers. I mean, I think it's been great, actually.
Huh.
I mean,
Glad to hear that.
Cool.
I was surprised.
So we also recorded a total of 959 connections in the city. Page 7 and 8 are supplemental charts for y'all. Does mayor or council have any further questions?
Nope.
Good.
None here.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Next up, G, financial report.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Just want to go ahead and present the financial report for this month for July. We go through pages 3 and 4, your account balances. Currently, you're just under 5 months reserve in your operating fund. We did indeed renew the CD that was due on 730, and that will mature next January for the 100,000 at 0.7% from Third Coast Bank. We do have your rates right now for text pull. I'm still monitoring those as of today. It is at 0.17. And then just real quickly, I'll touch up on the other two funds and then another statement. For your MEDC, you're about a little over 2 years reserve and about 10.5 months reserve in your utility fund. And if there's at any point in time that there is money that we can set off to the side and put into a CD because of the rates going down, it is another option to do at any point in time. Putting in a 3-month, 6-month, year-long CD, at least that rate will be locked. So if there is any that we can put off to the side, if there's not, certain that we need to keep liquid or some that we don't need to keep liquid, then it is an option to pursue if y'all are interested. So I just want to point that out to y'all.
Unless you worry that rates are going up, in which case then you've locked yourself in lower.
Mm-hmm. So going on to your cash flow for your operating account, we did receive we did do the transfer for the $365,000 for the FEMA reimbursement from the Capital Projects Fund, as well as you did receive your sales tax. There's nothing too out of the ordinary in the disbursements other than there were 3 pay periods compared to normally 2 for this month. We did also transfer over just over $289,000 to your debt service. That's of course to cover your debt payment for this upcoming week. And just a side note, due to the fact that the hurricane was going to be coming in, I went ahead and did the debt payment today, which will settle tomorrow. Since it's due on 9/1, I just didn't want to take any chances whatsoever on it. So I went ahead, talked to First Financial, and because we originally were going to do it on Friday just to make sure it got done, but better safe than sorry. I went ahead and did it today, so then tomorrow it'll hit, and so we'll be taken care of on that side.
When interest rates are 0, there's no cost to paying 3 days early, whereas the cost of having a hurricane wreck your transfer plans can be very high. So that's a low risk, high return strategy.
Yes. And then just going over your budget items on pages 11 through 16, I've gone ahead and updated the amended budget numbers into your annual budgets. So these are all current. We did receive about $375,000 in the month of August for your sales tax. So that leaves you around $2,124,000 total for the fiscal year that you have collected. And about 3/4 of that was about $281,000. The rest of it, $93,000, was transferred into the MEDC fund. And that's pretty much all the highlights, unless there's questions.
I had
no, just wondering if Richard is sweating the lack of fees going in from tickets. I noticed there were only 40 citations written last month.
Yeah, that is definitely down. That was not unnoticed.
I had a question on page 22.
Okay.
Under water systems, capital projects, those, I guess, year-to-date budget, that's for the new projects like for the downtown State Highway 105 water line. So we budgeted up 418,000. That's what I'm looking at. Or really budgeted for the year 502.
That the 418, that's the year to date that you would have as of July 31st. The 502 is the is of September 30th.
Yeah, I guess the project we approved a couple of meetings ago for almost $1 million. Okay. And then the other one we were talking about tonight, the 366. All right. Most of these probably will not happen. They'll probably happen in the next budget cycle. So we just roll it over. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else have any other questions? Something I want to mention, David May, who used to own the McDonald's here, he bought the PD 10 emergency kits to be in their cars, mobile, just out of the kindness of his heart. And I thought it was awesome. It was a very nice touch, and he was very grateful and thankful to the city, even though he no longer is a business owner and contributor to our tax base here. I thought it was very thoughtful, Justin. I want to make sure that that didn't go unnoticed in this meeting. Next item agenda on your number 12 on the agenda: consideration and possible action regarding.
Oh, wait. Can we have the engineers? Can we have the engineers report?
Yes. Sorry, Chris. I just skipped right on over you.
No problem. You'll catch me in 2 items anyway. Good to have our report. I'll go through the highlights, and again, we'll talk about the water plant improvement project as a separate item. First page, the grant or the CDBG project, that is still ongoing to get that closed out. As of last update, it's still under desk review with the TDA to get the final draw released on that. So that's ongoing. And if you have been out there, the corner work was completed by Laurel at Paving, and Mike worked with them to get the corners filled in right there at Baja and MLK. Item 2, downtown waterline project. That is, we're working with the Water Development Board on the final contract documents. With being Water Development Board, there's a lot of extra paperwork that we're working through with the contractor to get that started. Water Plant 3 we'll talk about shortly. We talked about the GLO projects and the drainage analysis earlier in the meeting. Flipping over to page 2, the lift station number 1 project. We do not have a pay estimate this month. Contractor is essentially complete or substantially complete with the project, and we are just waiting on power. So Entergy has been continuing to delay and or not responding very quickly to requests to get the new power service set. And especially with the storm that's coming in, I think that's going to further delay it. So we had a coordination meeting earlier today. So once power is ready, everyone's ready to do the switch. But right now, everyone's kind of at a standstill waiting on power. So, and then you have pictures of the current status or as of last week. Going to page 3, regarding development. Most of these you have seen before. A handful of plan reviews in and out this month for the townhomes, AutoZone, Hills of Town Creek, and Moonover, Montgomery. The plat reviews, nothing new to update. And then ongoing construction. We had the final inspection at the end of July for the water line that is going between where Starbucks is and the retail center. And they're addressing the final punch list items. And the main thing left there is the paperwork side of the bonds and guarantees that they have to submit. And then the final page, page 4, TxDOT Atkins Creek. We met with one of the property owners end of last week to discuss right-of-way donation, and he was open to the process to provide it. We've asked TxDOT to lay that out again, since last time we went with it with the turn lane, it took quite a long time for TxDOT to agree on what they wanted us to do. But it sounds like we're starting to move that way for the property owner to donate the right of way for those improvements to be made. On the turn lane, we did get an update this month, which was after this report went out. They're actually have it on the schedule to complete in August of 2021 versus waiting until the FM 149 improvements project. So that was good news to hear. And as of, I believe last week, they'd sent or were internally doing some design work on it, or at least starting design work. So that's moving a whole lot quicker than they have originally been telling us, which is good news, as long as they keep on it. And that is all I have, unless you have any specific questions for me.
Chris, I had one. I mentioned this to Richard about 3 or 4 weeks ago. I walked Montgomery with Larry a few weeks back, and he showed me what he's done so far. And I mentioned to Richard, I know that he's going to be building a retention pond kind of in the back towards my property. That's going to be phase 2 or 3, I think he said, farther down the road. I was concerned a little bit because they've already cleared all the land going all the way back to my driveway. It's kind of a runway to my driveway, garage straight to Sarah's house if the waterfall jumps the road. So I was a little concerned with all of that vegetation now being gone to slow it down a little bit, and plans of him not to put that retention pond in till the next phase. What's the happen with that water?
In his current, so the first time we reviewed his plans was back in July. So we haven't heard back from them since we returned them. And at that time, that was one of the comments, was clarifying what's phase 1 and phase 2. And that would be one of the things that we would want, at least a portion of that pond constructed to offset the development that's going on in phase 1. From a practical standpoint, it would make more sense for him to build the whole pond now and then just expand later, because if you already are digging the pond, it's not that big. But we'll when it comes back in for review, we'll be sure to look closely on that. But that is going to be what we're going to require, is that he has the whole pond in, or at least has a portion of the pond in to offset what he's doing today.
Well, that was a concern.
And then as far as what he's already done, I'll need to follow up to see. He doesn't have approved plans from the city for any of the work. So I don't know what he has done specifically, but we can take a look or get with Mike and Dave and make sure that he's following the right process.
I appreciate it if we could, just simply because, not just for myself, but for my neighbors in Buffalo Springs. Right now, they've already gone through and they've cleared from Clipper all the way back to about 15 feet in front of my driveway. It's just a runway of, open space. Nothing slowing anything down. So if we could,
yeah, we'll definitely take a look at that, and we'll let you know what we hear.
I'd hate for my Jeep to be sitting in Sarah's front yard.
Yeah, it's a concern.
Yeah.
Thank you. Chris, I had a question about B and C. I noticed on one of the projects, I guess the water project, you show that you're waiting for the Texas Water Development Board to review the final review. But I thought, and on the Water Plan 3, I thought they've already reviewed it. Do you have 2 reviews with them?
So what they require is that once you bid the project, they review the bids. Once you bid and award the project, they then review those documents. And then there's a bunch of additional, with it being federal funds, that the contractor submit his minority women-owned business plan, his all his, I can't remember all the different documents, but there's a whole list of them. And so they review those and approve those prior to the city executing the contract. And that's a condition. So they did their review and approval of the plans and the specs and the draft or empty contracts that were bid. And then they review all the documents that are submitted to make sure that the contractor is SAM.gov, he's not disbarred, etc.
Okay, so really there's 2 what you're saying, like Water Plan 3, I know they reviewed it, I think in 2019. So you're saying there'll be a final review once the bid is approved.
Correct. So they've reviewed both of those projects and approved them for their scope. Now it's just approving that the contractor and all the paperwork associated with it is in order for them. And that's a condition to them releasing construction funds.
And you're meeting all their conditions.
That's correct.
Stipulations. The other question I had was on the bypass facilities we have for lift station number 1. Is the city, as this project kind of drags on, is the city having to pay extra to have those facilities, or do we actually buy those when we did this project?
They're not. So those were bid as part of the project as a lump sum by the contractor. So the contractor gave a lump sum price, and I'm going off memory, in the neighborhood of $25,000, $30,000 to set up and operate and maintain that bypass system. So it wasn't bid by day or by week, it was a lump sum, and he has not requested a change order for additional compensation for that.
So what you're saying is he's footing the bill then?
That's correct.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Sure thing.
So if we're done with that, before Sarah starts on the next item, may I move to accept the the departmental reports as presented?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that we accept the departmental reports as presented. This motion is debatable, amendable, and requires majority vote. It is now open for discussion. All those in favor of accepting the departmental reports as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. The ayes have it. The motion carries, and we will accept the departmental reports as presented. Now on to number 12. Thank you, Councilwoman Huss. Consideration of possible of Montgomery EDC approval to purchase radios for the use by city personnel during festival events.
Okay. The MEDC took action at its August 17th, 2020 meeting to approve the use of funds to purchase the radios that are described in the attachments. These radios will be primarily used to provide communications among city staff and volunteers in organizing and safely setting up, operating, and taking down festival events. In addition, these radios would allow direct communication with city police personnel who are assigned to that event, thereby ensuring a direct line of communication for public safety. In the past, we've relied on cell phone communication, which when you have large groups together, sometimes can get a little bit limited in large gathering areas. As this item is for $10,000 or greater, and it was not originally budgeted for the MEDC, this expenditure of MEDC funds must be approved by the City Council. Within the MEDC budget, they're looking at utilizing funds that otherwise would have been spent on city events. And I think that's a consistent use of the funds for this item because these radios will be used for events in the future. And so, as I said, since it's $10,000 or greater and wasn't originally budgeted, this should be considered and would need the approval of City Council to move forward.
And if I may say, it's a line item that is not being utilized this year since the events that had money allocated towards them have been deferred due to COVID.
Between events, where will you store these at? In City Hall?
We would keep those at City Hall in a secured area that has limited access, primarily myself and the police chief. And this would be as we said, this would be the primary use for those radios. I could see where I might authorize their use in certain emergency situations if that became necessary, but that's not the primary use. These would be purchased for the primary use by the MEDC for festival support.
I see where you have a repeater in there and a battery charger and all that. Do these batteries also kind of coincide with the same one your police force uses?
I don't know specifically with regards to the police radios. The chief is on this call. He may be able to answer that. I do know that this is being purchased, as a set group, so it's designed to work with itself. And with regards to the repeater, it is needed for this frequency as separate from anything that we have for the police. So,
no, these batteries won't coincide with the batteries. They won't coincide with the batteries that we have. We have spoken with the fire department. They've agreed to let us use whatever we need to put on top of their antennas in order to get the range that we need with these radios. And as the city manager says, we'll use these mainly for events. They won't come up under any other occasion unless we have what we're about to have now. It is an emergency management situation. We may use them at that time. But those will be the only time those radios will be used.
Yeah, a lot of these batteries need to be cycled sometime because they get a short life. So you got to put them in a machine that cycles them through and keeps them fully charged.
Right, and we'll have all that set here, and we'll have it in an area that's secure, and keep those charged up. And the cost of those radios, it's not just the cheap ones that normally people will pick up just for those events. These are actual pretty good radios that were purchased strictly for these purposes.
All right, thank you.
I think it's a luxury that we don't need. It's almost $15,000, I think, for festivals that should rent radios at first until they're, justify the use. We don't even know when the next festival is. So I'm not all for this at all.
How are they communicating now?
Either cell phones or you don't. The last event that I was involved in was the Christmas parade, and there actually was a safety issue where communication was not possible, and the security personnel that were there did not, I can hardly believe it, they didn't know who I was, and I wasn't able to get in touch with Chief Solomon to rectify the situation. So we actually had civilian cars entering the Christmas parade while there were people walking ahead of and behind. And the person who is not part of our, the security person who is not part of Montgomery Police Department refused to close that gap. You know, to me, $15,000, it's a lot of money, except for if you have an emergency that you're able to avert or a situation that you're able to avert. It's nothing compared to a lawsuit. It's nothing compared to somebody's life. It's nothing compared to a public relations disaster. And you'll never know if it was useful for that because you're preventing something that didn't happen. So it's kind of the dog that doesn't bark. You know, so we're looking to make things more convenient, and I suppose you could rent them. I'm not sure what the market is for that. We weren't asked to find out what that was. MEDC, I believe, voted 5-1. Sorry, we had one member who wasn't present in favor of this item. And it is an expensive item. It comes with a 5-year warranty, so you're looking at $3,000 over 5 years for this thing that could be an important part of a security situation, which has definitely changed over, you know, the last few years. And I think communication, reliable communication with organizers of festivals and parades and other events has been something that Chief Solomon has rightly demanded that we implement. You know, I personally saw the impact of not being able to affect that live.
Let me add this to that as well. The first festival, it didn't take long. The first festival that I worked here, we had approximately 7 officers on duty in a crowd of about 400, 500 people. And the people that were in charge of that festival had no way of getting in touch with us. I know at one point we had a fight up near the bandstand. And so these radios are critical in getting us to those locations when those things happen, and being there for those people. Because a lot of times you get these festivals like the Wine Fest. You know, people are drinking, and sometimes those drinks get to be too much for them. And these radios will be an added plus to working these festivals. I understand we don't have any right now, but this time is going to have festival after festival, and this is something that we'll need to help control those festivals and keep security going.
I know when I go to festivals, I see the folks that are working the festival with a walkie-talkie, with a handheld, versus their own cell phones, because of the fact that they can get in touch with other folks that are running the festival or security much more quickly than trying to use cell phone service.
It is a lot more quicker, because last year we were doing the parade was a real test of that. It was really kind of hard to get someone on the phone. Yep. Because everybody was kind of busy doing what they needed to do. And I looked at my phone, had several calls that I'd missed, and had to start calling those people back again. So cell phones, we tried that. It's just not the proper way and a safe way of doing those festivals and parades.
And I think it's also helpful because, you know, the police can hear what the organizers are talking about, unless the organizers obviously deliberately go offline. But, you know, the police can decide, hey, let's drift over here. They're starting to talk about things we might be interested in. You know, it's not worth a call to 911, or it's not worth a call for our security. But the civilians might be thinking that, but the police might be saying, yeah, this is something actually we are interested in. You know, different perspectives based on training might tell you something different than what the organizers are thinking. And that's what happens is the radios are geared to one frequency. The officers can add it into what they're hearing on their microphones, or sorry, their speakers. And so, you know, we can't call, you know, all of Montgomery County Sheriff's Department with these unless all of them tune in, obviously. But it's an interesting alternative, and like I said, I think it changes the dynamics of security quite a bit.
How many radio we talking about, Kitty?
Yeah.
I think we ended up with about 12 to 14.
Yeah, this order has 12 radios on it.
And the organizer, they would have to sign out.
Oh, absolutely. No one gets a radio without those radios being signed out, and at the end of the event, those radios have to be signed back in.
Right.
We'll know who's got each one of those radios.
Okay.
And MEDC also talked about requiring a sizable deposit as well. These are not, you know, these are not the walkie-talkies you send your kids out to the backyard with.
No.
Does your position, chief, that these are tools that you need to that help you and your officers perform your jobs even better?
Oh, absolutely. Especially during a festival. I've done tons of festivals. I was pretty stunned that we have not come to that yet when it comes to communication between the people who are organizing these things and the people who are in security. This is probably the best communication to keep everybody on the same page of what's going on.
As far as I'm concerned, if it's a tool that the chief can use to help our security and our safety, I'm all for anything the chief needs. I just want to make sure these are, you know, obviously used for those purposes only, you know.
Oh, absolutely. So, they're not a radio that we can use in our daily.
Yeah, it's the same.
As a matter of fact, the county will have to change our radio systems in it.
Yeah. So
Although
what you're saying,
MEDC did talk about, though, we would never prevent it from being used by city staff in the case of an emergency. You know, if they said that, you know, Public Works was here in the, you know, like say the hurricane ended up, you know, really causing a crisis and all communications were down, you know, if Richard felt that that all 5 of them needed to have these radios, you know, we certainly would not expect them to sit unused at City Hall when they were needed for the safety and communication of our city employees.
Tom, would you be on
But if
board
they
if
drop
we
in
were
the puddle,
currently
they're
having?
paying for them.
Sorry.
Go
I was
ahead.
gonna ask Tom, would you be on board with this if we were currently still having festivals right now?
No, because I guess personally, I want to prove their use, their necessity. I just think it's a $15,000 luxury that, again, I wouldn't mind renting radios for the next couple festivals, just to see how we can put them to good use. But right now, no.
When you're talking about renting radios, you're looking at the maintenance that's being kept on those radios and who we're renting those radios from. In my experience, a lot of times when you start to rent those radios, they're not as quality as the ones that we have. We have to change our frequency. The fire department has already agreed to let us put those antennas on their towers in order to get the range that we need. And so what we're talking about is if we start to rent radios, we bring a different radio in each time, whatever that company's got. And we can't guarantee that we're going to be able to spread in the area that we need to communicate in. With these radios, we get a guarantee that we'll be able to reach those areas every time.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think to Tom's point, we just want to see there be that big of a benefit first. I mean, before you invest that much money.
Yeah, and I don't think this is something that can, you know, I've used them in the past, and I understand what you're saying, sir, that you'd like to see the proof and whether they're going to be a benefit to us. I'll tell you from my experience, there'll be a benefit, and there's really no way to do that until we have our next festival and see how that goes compared to it went last year with the cell phone.
Gotcha.
I was going to say, and I have the experience of last year where we didn't have it and we had a security incident that, was not solvable with cell phones. And the
So we can make a
MEDC.
motion and make it up and down?
Go ahead, DJ.
I make a motion to authorize the use of Montgomery Economic Development funds for purchase of radio for use by the city during festival events for an amount not to exceed $14,614.65.
I'll second that.
It has been moved and seconded that we authorize the Montgomery EDC to approve to purchase radios for use by city personnel during festivals and events not to exceed $14,614.65. This motion is debatable, amendable, or requires a majority vote. It is now open for discussion.
Would it be possible, Richard, to get prices of rentals before we vote on this?
Except for Kevin, he just said that the rentals don't work because the whole point is having the repeater on the tower.
It's having the repeaters and the antennas that are on the tower. Each time you get a rental, you're not going to be guaranteed that you're going to get the same frequency. You're not going to be guaranteed that you're going to get the same airspace and the same air coverage. That's the only thing with the rental.
I mean, you know what equipment you're working with, and we've already vetted it out with the police and fire. So it's like you're purchasing something that is approved, if you will, and able to work. I mean, do you remember? What festival was it? But there was a gentleman that was on narcotics that drove into the grass and into people, and cell phones didn't work then either. People had to run to go get help. So if there had been somebody with a handheld, then that situation and that incident would have been handled a lot more quickly. It got a little bit ugly, intense.
That is true. I know from spending 15 years at Verizon Wireless that large gatherings tie up the signals. Definitely, the towers do get busy and phone calls don't go through. That is a true fact.
Right. And if you've ever called 911, I mean, the operators do a good job, but sometimes it can be so infuriating to explain things. And you're like, just tell them to come to the community center. I don't know the address. Just, you have these crazy conversations. It's like, tell Kevin to get over here. I know he's around here somewhere. Yeah. And they pretend that they've never heard of Montgomery.
911 doesn't know the bank statue, but our officers in our
these radios would be used more so than just at the festival, right?
The only other time these radios would be used is in an event like now. If it's a emergency management, such as a hurricane or something like that, and our public works needs those radios, then we would use them at that time as well.
Sometimes if you had something going on at the school, some of those areas phones don't work.
Yeah, the school has a lot of dead zones, but those are things that we're going to have to work out with our city radios. The ones that we use, we're going to have the school purchase because what they did not do, they did not put the right antennas in those schools when they started. So it makes communication bad in there. But these won't be radios that we would use for an event like that because you're talking now an active shooter or something that's going on in the school. So these radios, because at that point, we won't be able to reach any other agencies as well.
Right.
I like the idea if they're being used for those other purposes. I mean, I remember earlier this year when T-Mobile was down for 2 days, things like that. We as a city need to have something we can grab and keep going. So not just for festivals, for other situations. I'm on board with that. I'm ready if everyone else is.
And the EDC is planning on supporting, and I think the city is growing to more events. It's not just going to be the Wine Festival and the Antiques Festival being the only things that are happening in the Christmas parade. Our intent is to support and actively engage more events in the city. So.
Okay.
All right. Council, are you ready for the question?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
All those in favor of authorizing Montgomery EDC to approve the purchase of radios for use by city personnel during festival and events not to exceed $14,614.65, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no.
No.
The ayes have it. The motion carries, and we will authorize the Montgomery EDC to purchase radios for use by city personnel during festival and events not to exceed $14,615.65. Next item of business is number 13. Consideration and approval for the proposed Montgomery EDC FY 2020-2021 operating budget.
Every year, the city council reviews and approves the annual budget for the MEDC. It's part of the city council, having some oversight over the MEDC. The MEDC held a budget workshop on August 7, 2020 to prepare the draft budget. They also reviewed that draft budget at the MEDC regular meeting of August 17, 2020. On September 1, 2020 is the planned date for the MEDC budget hearing, which must be held before they adopt their budget. Attached to this is the budget that has come through from the workshop and their meeting review. And so that's presented here for city council discussion, and approval. And then it will go back ultimately, as I said, to MEDC for their public hearing and their final approval. So are there any questions?
If not, I'll make a motion to approve the fiscal year 2021 annual budget for the Montgomery Economic Development Corporation.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that we adopt the proposed budget for Montgomery EDC FY 2021. This motion is debatable, amendable, or majority vote. It is now open for discussion. All those in favor of adopting the Montgomery EDC FY 2020-2021 operating budget say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The motion carries, and we will adopt the Montgomery EDC FY 2020-2021 operating budget. Next item of business on your agenda. Number 14, consideration of possible action regarding acceptance of the bid and award of the construction contract for water plant number 3 improvements.
Okay, with the bid that's here, there's the base bid, which includes improvements to water plant number 3, the cooling tower and heat exchanger, which would result in a 2 in operation at the plant. This equipment cools the warm water pump from the Catahoula Aquifer. Replacing and upsizing 100,000 gallon ground storage tank with a 210,000 gallon ground storage tank. Addition of a third 10,000 gallon hydropneumatic pressure tank, miscellaneous recoating items. There is an alternate bid item number A2, which adds not the 10,000 gallon hydropneumatic pressure tank, but a 15,000 gallon hydropneumatic pressure tank in its place. That provides an increase to the total water plant capacity by 1,125 single family connections. The additional cost for the additional 5,000 gallons is $12,000, which was recommended by the engineer. In addition, there was a bid alternate A1 adding a 900 gallon booster pump, which was not recommended by the engineer. This project, along with the downtown water line development that was recently approved, is partially funded at around 70% by Texas Water Development Board funds, and partially funded by the city at approximately 30%. And this has put the city council to act as it deems appropriate with the engineer's recommendation as attached. And so if, Chris is here available if there's any questions or additional discussion items.
If I can, sure thing.
Go ahead.
I was going to do a quick kind of intro before it, give you a little bit of background numbers so you had it and where this gets the city in terms of what the project actually does. So our final estimate that we put together for this project right before when it went to bidding with the alternate A2 was $922,900 with the actual bid coming in at $996,550. So that's about 8% difference in what we expected. We had 2 bidders that bid on the project. We expected to have 3 to 4 talking to those contractors. It just was a matter of timing, what else was going on. We also knew that with COVID, things are very up in the air and prices are all over the place. So the 2 bids we did get from R&B Constructors and from WW Payton are both contractors we work with frequently. They're very good contractors. that have experience with this type of work. As far as the alternates go, so the original scope of the project back from the 2015 study had I believe the booster pump was in there. At least it was added at some point in the past. It was bid, and as I think we discussed in the past and definitely discussed with the PERC committee, the benefit of that booster pump, yes, it adds to the overall capacity of booster pumps, but that is not the limiting factor of your facilities. That is your hydro tanks. So with the alternate to increase the hydro tank by an additional 5,000 gallons, what that gets you to is a rule that says that if you have 30,000 total gallons between all your plants, you can go up to 2,500 connections in your system. And right now, your actual connection count is closer to the 900 range because you don't have to count irrigation connections in there when you're looking at those numbers. So based on the projections that we looked at, what this project will get used to beyond 2024 of actual, by the time, based on the projections and build out what's being designed, et cetera. So it gets you well down the road. And when you get to that 2,500 gallon mark is when you have to start looking at an elevated storage tank. So that is a time when you either build an elevated tank or you do a alternate capacity request to the state to get them to approve for you to do something else. So our recommendation is for the base bid plus the alternate to switch it out to a 15,000 gallon hydro tank for $12,000. The additional $90,000 to put in the booster pump we don't feel is the most advantageous right now. It doesn't get us as far down the road as putting the $12,000 in the booster pump or in the hydro tank.
So were you at the meeting where we said that we were going to put the larger tank in as the primary bid instead of the alternate bid?
I was.
Is there a reason why that didn't happen?
The reason we left it that way is that's how it was submitted originally with the base bid to the state, is here what the base items are going to be. So since that was already done, we left it. I don't believe that affected the cost with the $12,000 difference between the tanks, but that's why it was left the way it was, or the way it was bid.
Were you at the meeting where Champaign said that it was important to work with Torque to resolve some of the issues that they had and concerns over this water project?
I believe we did. I mean, we met with Torque multiple times to talk about this project and go through the scope and the changes. And
so does this include using chlorine gas instead of liquid chlorine?
It does not, because the disinfection system isn't being changed in this project and was not in the scope.
So I'm sorry, is the answer yes, it includes chlorine gas?
No, yes, it includes chlorine gas, but again, we're not changing any of the disinfection equipment with this project.
So
it's a future capital project.
There's no added chlorine equipment in this.
And I need to go, I can't remember exactly on the plans, but I believe that the only thing that would change is potentially where the existing lines are routed. I have to go back and look specifically, but actual changing out of equipment is not included.
So chlorine gas is added to the water that comes through here the same way that chlorine, liquid chlorine is?
No, it would be a different system. And it's a different change out, different pumps, different tanks. That wasn't in this scope.
So it is added to this. Because I'm just feeling like, I'm feeling what I'm looking at when I look at the 15,000 gallon as the secondary bid instead of the primary, like what we talked about at one of the meetings as a high priority to make sure that we get the best bid, because the people know, the bidders know that this is a thing that we are putting a big focus on. Like, I'm wondering what else isn't included in this bid that we put on as a priority. So to me, safety is a big factor, and chlorine gas is a big problem to me. I know that that's what's already being used, but corrosion is a big thing. That's how we lost potentially 1 million gallons of water last summer. So working out that whole problem, which is something that Torque has been working on, and their huge list of issues that they had, which I distinctly remember Champaign scathingly commenting about, because having been the recipient of his gas or whatever the word might be. I find it distinctly memorable. He told us specifically that he wanted torque included and circled in on this, and all of these issues worked out. And I don't have confidence if the 15,000 gallon booster isn't the number one priority on this bid, instead it's an alternate bid. I also don't have any confidence that any of these other issues have been worked out and included in the specs of the bid.
They were. So, the reason it wasn't changed was, again,
they were or were not?
They were. So, I mean, one of the items that we talked with the TOR committee was specifically for corrosion cathodic protection. And so that was included in the project to put in the cathodic protection that was discussed with the TOR committee. The other things talked with the TOR committee were regarding data collection and the ability to better monitor, measure, and record the functionality of the system and of the cooling towers. And so those additional readings and sensors and gauges were put on per the recommendation. So we're able to better track the performance and get ahead of maintenance, et cetera, by reviewing and tracking that with the committee. Now, as far as the chlorine gas, we did have that discussion, and that wasn't in the scope of this project. That is something that we said we definitely need to get on the long-term plan for the city to switch out the facilities to liquid, but it wasn't in this scope and therefore wasn't included in this work.
So are we spending money creating chlorine gas or using chlorine gas?
No, we're not changing out the disinfection equipment.
I'm not asking about changing it. Are we spending money in the construction of this item anywhere that is specific to chlorine gas?
The only thing that I can think of, and I will need to confirm, is if there was rerouting of existing lines to tie in with the new layout. I do not remember off the top of my head, but I can look that up.
Okay.
It was.
Because I'm not a fan of chlorine gas. I would like to get rid of it. I think it's an anachronism and nobody else uses it around here. And I think it's ridiculous that we would spend money on something that creates more use of chlorine gas as a new project.
It was in the 2015 project, Rebecca, start with, and then it got cut out, and it's been cut out since.
So I think that we should make it a priority if we have money now or in the capital project fund, or even if we don't, to make the change to this so we're not spending new money on an old, dangerous way of adding disinfectant to our water, and make this whole, if we're spending new money on a new project, we should do it right the first time, rather than, and even if it means we have to retrofit our old one at the same time, to do it right this time with our new project.
Let us do this. Let us look at the scope of what that would take to switch out. And then with this project, we can get the contractor to give us a price while he's on site and see if it makes sense to do it now or do it in the future. And just see what the scope would be to get that change. And then also for the approval from the state to make that change in disinfection.
I can't imagine that they would be angry if we want to go to safety rather than using chlorine gas.
Right, it's not an anger thing. It's a process of getting the change approved. Not that it's wrong, not that it's not done. It's a normal, as you said, many people around us are using it. It's just, again, you have to get it approved as you're making a change to the system and to how the drinking water is being treated. But again, let us look at it, and let us look at what that cost and scope would be. And then if we can get with the contractor and there's room in the budget to put that in and get that change out, we can definitely discuss that.
Is there a breakdown of whether these projects can be modularized in terms of, this is $1 million. Richard, how much do we have of the TWDB water for this grant? And I know that we have a portion that we have to pay as well. So
30% comes out of our pocket.
Right.
Yeah.
But if I do the math right, 70% of $1 million is what, $700,000?
Yeah,
Right. I don't have that exact figure in front of me, and I could get that from Effie, but essentially it's around $700,000. That's the Water Development Board money applied to this.
So we have about what, $300,000 left in the TWDB of this particular grant tranche or borrowing tranche rather. So we have to find our 300,000 plus the 400,000 remaining. So we need to find $700,000 of our own money for this.
But between the two projects, so in your budget that I know you'll have a workshop coming up this week, both of these bid amounts with the alternate is in the budget, as well as a additional $90,000 contingency for both, for combined for both of the projects, is what is in the draft budget that Richard will be presenting at the workshop.
So it all has to be done all at once.
As far as this water plant project?
The $1 million, it's $1 million a
Right.
bust, or $1 million and bust, whichever way you want to look at it.
Right. No, I mean, there's items, we would have to relook to see which item. So, with the cooling tower and the switching out of that, that's operational efficiency because it reduces or removes the recirculation and so reduces cost. And also the additional cooling that comes with having double the cooling capacity out there. The replacement of the ground storage tank, obviously that is a capacity part. So that gets you increased capacity in the plant and therefore able to serve larger. That is not your current limiting factor. But after, if you didn't do the ground storage tank, that would become your limiting factor. The other part is that ground storage tank is being replaced due to corrosion inside of it. And so that was part of it is, not doing additional maintenance to it and replacing that tank instead to get the capacity and take care of the issue.
Hold on right there for a minute. I hate to interrupt, but since you're on the tank, we just looked at it a month ago, right? Or two. We looked at both tanks. What did it look like?
We looked at both tanks. I'm sorry.
The storage tank, groundwater storage tanks you're talking about. We just did an inspection on them.
I would need to find, I don't believe we did, an interior inspection of that tank. I need to go back and look.
We emptied both of them and somebody must have went in and we just wasted 1 million gallons of water.
We did. Let's see here.
I guess while you're looking, it's my point of view is if we disinspected the tank, we have good current knowledge of what it looks like.
So the last interior, the last interior inspection of that tank was in 2016. The second take on that site, the last interior inspection was 2020. And back in 2016, it wasn't an issue. And I would have to go find those specific pictures. But
after we looked at it, did we coat it again?
We did not.
We coated, it wasn't that bad, huh?
That's correct.
Looking at this project, I think Tark was looking at, I'm not sure why we didn't bid a 500-gallon booster pump. Because right now our capacity is 567,000 a day, according to the TAC guidelines. And we chose not to do it, I guess you bid on a 900-gallon booster pump. So our capacity with this $1 million project, total plant capacity has not been increased at all, right? The connection count has been increased by the hydropneumatic drum, but not the total plant capacity number.
I would need to go back and look at our cheat sheet. I don't have that on me.
Well, I'm looking at it for you.
Right.
Yeah, if we put a 500-gallon booster pump in, like we have 3 or 4 of them out there,
right?
We'll increase our capacity for that plant from 560 to 729,000 gallons by one pump, using their guidelines. But to me, that would be worthwhile doing, and this is just me, putting that kind of equipment in, and maybe if the tank can last 2 or 3 more years, when we have the facility down, to maybe recoat it or do like Rebecca said, do the tank in a different stage. Because it's dismantling the old tank, if it still has some life in it, 2 or 3 years, that will get us closer to doing our raised elevated tower on the west side of town, and more so knowing where we're heading as far as our future growth and what we need. Instead of just putting that kind of money in destroying a good tank that we're using now, maybe, I guess what really I'm saying is I would like to is a way to maybe put this on hold and give staff a time to really look at more of these options and get back at a later time.
Yes.
Richard,
So
do you have any opinion on that?
I think that, and I know you asked Richard, but I think wait on awarding the project. Let us relook at some of these questions and options and regather with staff and kind of rediscuss it at a future meeting.
I have another question just on back on my chlorine thing. Like, well, did you know that vinegar and bleach lead to chlorine gas? So that's how I know so much about it. It's totally homegrown. But if we were to go to a liquid chlorine feed, would that reduce corrosion and maybe give Randy the extra year or two that he's thinking about for the ground storage tank? You know, if we do a couple of other things that we want to do for that, would that extend the life of the equipment that we already have in terms of corrosion?
Let me take a look. Let me see, go back and look at the pictures and see what options there are to delay some of these more to better fit within budget and see if we can bring this down. You know, I think, you know, obviously the other options for getting more life out of the tank is some recoating work inside. And so then it's, you know, an option of, you know, what is the cost of that recoat? How many years does it get us versus what is the cost of like you said, tearing down and replacing that tank? Let me take a look at that and let's regroup on this item and project. I'll get with Randy over the coming weeks as well as staff and kind of rehash out some of these potential alternatives to see if there's a better way to go about it.
Right. So the other crazy idea or wrench is just that, you know, we have more capacity in our Gulf Coast aquifer, which, I mean, you know, that potentially changes. I don't know if well 2 can work more or if we have more tank capacity up here. But, you know, now that we're not having to do as much Catahoula pumping as we thought we would have to, does that change any of our strategy over the next few years?
Right. We'll look at that. You know, when a lot of this was based on, and the scope was based on the 2015 study, which is very different with Lone Star changes.
Right.
I think that, you know, obviously the Catahoula is still your biggest well, and, you know, it's twice the size plus of your next well. So, you know, using that asset, you don't want to, just because it's hot, that you put it to the side. But what are options? Is it, you know, a different level of blending? Is it to be able to get that temperature reduction and delay some of this? So let us regroup on this one. We'll work with Randy, work with staff, and re-approach staff in the coming weeks. To
and I think it's realistic to think that we might end up with the restrictions that we had before on Gulf Coast aquifer pumping. But if it's a free-for-all for the next 5 years, then, you know, a lot changes in 5 years, and the time value of money gives you quite a bit of flexibility in the meantime.
Right, which is, you know, exactly why
5 years
the
from now
backfill
is
project
somebody
was
else's
put on.
problem.
So.
Yeah. So
Agreed.
it's there's a lot of moving parts right now, and it might be worth, actually, if you remember, I think early on in your career we had the offsite workshop where we spent quite a bit of time envisioning what the city would look like and how we rearrange our assets to deal with what the future conditions are.
I definitely think, I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, sorry.
I definitely think that kind of re-looking at that, because, you know, as we talked about before and met with the Torque before, the projections then versus the projections now, obviously you don't know what you don't know, is quite different. And so what the capacity is and what the demands are in the system, the projected demands are different. You know, it's still a worthwhile project, but maybe there is, you know, a way that we can get it further down the road with less scope of what was originally intended. I think, you know, over the past couple years or so that we've been working with the Torque Committee and Randy, we've gotten, our projections are much different than the 2015 study. I think we're relatively close to each other from what we got to. So we'll regroup and work with Randy and work with staff and come back to council and see what kind of options we can come up with.
So next meeting then, can I move then that we table item number 14 and Richard, please place it back on the agenda for the next meeting?
I'll make sure we bring that back and work with Chris as necessary between now and then.
But that was a motion if somebody wants to second it.
I'll second it.
It has been moved and seconded that we table item number 14 to the next meeting. This motion is debatable, amendable, requires majority vote. It is now open for discussion. All those in favor of tabling item number 14 till the next meeting, say aye.
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 Those opposed, say no. Yeah, I have it. The motion carries, and we will table item number 14 to the next meeting. Next item on your agenda, number 15. Consideration and possible action to authorize the termination of lease agreement by and between the City of Montgomery, Texas, and Raymond L. Lauder, executor of the estate of Raymond M. Lauder, regarding the premises of Montgomery Town Site 02, tracts 24 and 25, and authorize the city administrator to sign.
Okay, the sale of the property, of the Lauder property, triggered the early termination clause of the agreement, which the city chose not to exercise its right of first refusal to purchase the property. The title company processing the sale has requested the city formalize the termination of the lease with the execution of the termination of lease document that is attached. The item has been reviewed by the city attorney, who also recommends approval, and then we can move this matter forward.
I move to authorize the city administrator to sign the termination of lease agreement by and between the City of Montgomery, Texas, and Raymond L. Lauder, executor of the estate of Raymond M. Lauder, regarding the premises of Montgomery Town Site 2, tracts 24 and 25.
Second.
There's a vote and second that we get the city administrator to authorize the city administrator to terminate the lease agreement by and between the City of Montgomery and Raymond L. Lauder, executor of the estate of Raymond M. Lauder, regarding the premises of Montgomery Town Site 02, tracts 24 and 25. This motion is debatable, amendable, and requires majority vote. It is now open for discussion. All those in favor of authorizing the city administrator terminate the lease agreement by and between the City of Montgomery and Raymond L. Lauder, executive of the state of Raymond M. Lauder, regarding the premises of Montgomery Town Site 02, tracts 24, 25, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. The ayes have it. The motion carries, and we will authorize the city administrator to terminate the lease agreement by and between the City of Montgomery, Raymond L. Lauder, executive of the state, Raymond M. Lauder, on the premises of Montgomery Site 02, tracts 24 and 25. At this time, next item on the agenda is the executive session. The City Council reserves the right to discuss any of the items listed specifically under the heading or for any items listed above in executive closed session as permitted by law, including if they meet the qualifications in sections 551.071, consultation with attorney, 551.072, deliberation regarding real property, 551.073, deliberation regarding gifts, 551.074, personnel matters, 551.074, deliberation regarding security devices, and 551.087, deliberation regarding economic development negotiations of Chapter 551 of the Government Code of the State of Texas. Item number 16, adjourn into closed executive session as authorized by the Texas Open Meetings Act, Chapter 551 of the Government Code, in accordance with the authority contained in the following. A, Section 551.071, consultation with attorney, and B, Section 551.072, deliberation regarding real property. You have all been sent an additional Zoom link in your inbox, so please use that to go into executive session. I'll see you there.
And I show the time is 8:38 p.m.
Susan, I thought you'd be on your way home. I would have been. I'm taking it on the road, guys.
I thought she was cooking supper.
Hey, that's just her fake background right there. You know, she really is at home.
Everything's fake today.
That's all right.
She is on the beach right now.
Only.
The Margaritaville bar, right?
There you go. Land chart. All
Waiting
right.
for the hurricane.
Okay, where's Alan? There he is. Okay, we got TJ. TJ, I saw him on here. Is he gone?
Yeah, he was just on trying to connect.
I'll wait for TJ.
I was going to say a couple more minutes to see if he's trying to dial back in.
Yeah, he isn't back on yet.
I miss seeing him. I wonder if he's he's just playing a game where he's watching us, but we can't watch him, or if he's just always dialing in by phone. But I miss him a lot. He's a guy who doesn't really say much, so you really have to be near him to, you know, to converse.
Yeah, we haven't laid eyes on him since March.
No.
Here he comes.
Yeah, that's true.
TJ, we were just talking about you. We miss you. It's like seeing you in person.
I'm gonna get technical after a while.
So we weren't complaining that we were late. That you were late. We just haven't seen you, like seen you in person.
Laid eyes on you.
And it's best to do that title search. I've been on this property for years, and something came up with Larry Jacobs and I that we had to work through, and then we're still working through it. So you better do that search.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So it is 9:10, and we are going to reconvene into open session. Possible action from executive session, item number 17. Consideration of possible action, if necessary, on matters deliberated in closed executive session.
I move to authorize the city administrator to continue to negotiate regarding real property and authorize the city attorney to draft paperwork for same.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to authorize the city administrator to negotiate real property and work with the city attorney for the same. What did you say? Well, as read. This motion is debatable. Minimum requires majority vote. All those in favor of authorizing the city administrator on the duties as read, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. The ayes have it. The motion carries, and we will authorize the city administrator as presented. Council inquiry. Is there any council inquiry this evening?
No, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. I have a couple.
Okay.
It's a house on MLK 1018 MLK. Is that a Richard Susan? Is that a bread and breakfast?
Are you talking the one on the corner of MLK and Baja?
No, it's on down. It's by McGinnis Lane. It's a house on the other side of her. It's 1018 MLK.
Well, we haven't received any hotel taxes, so I don't know that they're.
Do you know the owner of the house? Anybody know?
So, TJ, is it on the south side of MLK or the north side?
South. The reason I'm asking, it's always a lot of activity there on the weekends, and people have been wondering what's going on.
And that address is 1018 MLK?
I think that's what they told me. They told me it was 1018 MLK, but I'll double check tomorrow and see. I talked to the office Chambers and them today about it, and they're gonna look into it also.
Okay, because we can check and look at the records on that.
Okay, all right.
So just great. FYI, if it's a formal bed and breakfast, they do have to register, but if it's Airbnb, that's not a city permitted activity, nor do they pay city taxes.
Okay, but it might be, hopefully it's not what we thinking.
We voted against Airbnbs in the city. So yeah, right? I don't know, Buffalo Springs.
Maybe in Buffalo Springs, but I'm pretty sure that we're not allowed to in the city.
All right, just, and also thank Chris and Richard for the work. People are satisfied with that bar on MLK Street there on that corner.
Yep.
And the only other thing that we have is just, we need to know what that is going on, because it's curious.
I can understand the curiosity.
All right. I didn't put it out there what it's curious about, but it's curious. All right, that's all I have.
We can follow up on that one that you gave us.
Okay. I'll double check that address, but it's right across from my mother's place, so I know where it is.
I had a couple for the staff maybe to do a follow-up on at a later time. One of them was how is Energy doing as far as getting their isolation or looking at adding isolation to the north side of town? That was on one of their follow-up lists, to maybe have their engineering group either do a manual or automated isolation to the north side of the city of Montgomery. And the other one was, I think we asked this a couple of weeks ago about kind of where we stood on center point availability about moving forward with them coming into the city, since they have a pipeline running through here and running and selling gas to Waterpoint. Waterstone, I'm sorry. That's it.
Okay, I'll see that we can try to make contact with them. Obviously, I'll wait till next week past hurricane and.
No problem. They're gonna be both busy probably.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what Entergy told us, Randy. So,
They were engineering it.
yeah. Okay, that's great. That's a great point. Thanks.
But enough time has gone on. It'll be a good time to follow up.
True.
But especially in this situation with the storm where with no isolation on the north side, any tree that gets blown into the line, that 149 is gonna shut the north side down. We're pretty high risk, especially in a storm like this. Thank you.
TJ, the appraisal district says that Billy Hodgkins is the owner, Hoskins, but the last sale date was 1987. So
What is?
Billy Hoskins is the owner, but the sale date was in the 80s. So there's been no recent transaction according to the appraisal district. So there's no reason that things should be changing. Oh, did we lose him again?
I see him.
Mm-hmm.
In and out.
The one just going past Lorraine's mobile home, which is the one just past it. Yep. So it's been there quite a while.
So I'm just looking at the address you gave me. That's what it says the owner is.
Oh, okay.
Not looking at the map.
And did that person live in Montgomery, or did they show their address out of town?
Cross Drive in Houston.
Okay, it's something. Oh, okay. We'll look and see what's going on.
Yeah, well, hopefully Richard will ask the chief to nail it down.
Right.
I'm gonna go right along.
So, may I make a motion to adjourn then?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The motion carries, and at 9:17 we will adjourn. Thank you, everyone.
Be safe.
Yep.
Will do.
Water.
Thank you, everyone.
Night.
Bye.